Sorry. Hey, you guys, I'm back. Thanks to Dick Blumenthal for his great leadership. I want to reiterate what Senator Blumenthal said. You know, we can win this one. Sometimes in the Trump era, they won the House and the Senate. We just got to fight the fight. Sometimes the fight is elsewhere. It's, you know, in the courts or some other venue. But this is the most important fight. Whatever it is that you care about, in addition to this, it is important to understand that as a strategic matter, the most important thing that we can all collectively focus on is getting the word out about how rotten this bill is. And the thing that's kind of alarming to me, you know, in addition to the substance of the bill, is that like only 1 in 4 Americans actually understand how bad this bill is on the healthcare side, what it's going to do to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Okay, I got a question from somebody on Facebook. Can you clarify why Dems can't filibuster this procedurally? I'm going to answer this as quickly as I can and try not to lose any viewers. The short version is this is a budget process that is one of the very few things you can do in the Senate that is subject to a bare majority vote. So regular legislation, you need 60 votes. But because this is a bill that either increases or decreases the deficit, and it certainly increases the deficit, but if it does anything to the deficit, then it is subject to this weird, ridiculous process called reconciliation. Frankly, we use that for the American Rescue Plan and for the Inflation Reduction Act, so it is available to the majority if they've got the votes. So we can't filibuster. What we really need is 4 Republicans in the House or 4 Republicans in the Senate to kill the bill. And the only way we get that is if those people are more afraid of their constituents electorally than they are of Donald Trump. Next question, Mark from Facebook. Trump threatens people on social media, but now he's taking things too far. How will you guys help to keep judges safe and people trying to keep our democracy intact like poll workers? It's a really important question. Look, I don't think we're going to enact any new laws to keep judges safe. I will say that when judges were threatened, I think it was during the Biden administration, we passed additional resources and penalties for threatening or harming members of the judiciary, and that should be a bipartisan principle. But obviously, you know, Donald Trump is trying to move the line on what is considered fascist every day of the week. So again, I don't want to tell you I have a magic bullet here. I don't want to say bullet, a magic solution here. But fighting for the rule of law sort of outside of the Capitol is important. Trying to legislate inside of the Capitol is important. Supporting lawsuits is important. And, you know, part of our job is actually to try to get some Republicans on board with where their red lines are. Okay, Amy from YouTube, technical question. Will the section trying to assign regulatory review to OMB go under the Byrd rule? Wow, that is a technical question. I don't know the answer to that because it has to do with what the parliamentarian rules. So I think I'm just going to give you my blunt answer, which is I just have no idea. My sense is no. I mean, that it will be removed from the bill, but I don't think we know what she's going to decide because the arguments haven't even been made. Oh yeah, can you please debunk the myth that they are only cutting migrant Medicaid? The only way you think that this is only cutting migrant Medicaid, not really migrant, I think you mean people who are illegally in the country, is if you think 14 million people are on Medicaid who are not citizens of the United States. Like, that's not plausible at all. What they are trying to do is increase the administrative burden, the paperwork burden, to the point where people just kind of like cycle out of the system. These are eligible people who can't figure out the paperwork, right? They're trying to do this with Social Security as well, but this is clearly a cut to Medicaid, and it is going to shut down rural hospitals, shut down rural clinics, and cause many, many people to lose their health care overall. Next, we have Sue on Facebook. So in H.R. 1, what about the provision that rejects the authority of the courts to hold government officials in contempt when they violate court orders? This would apply to all temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, or permanent ones that have ever been issued. Yeah, this is outrageous. This is nuts. It's so bad that even Republicans in the House who voted for it are now saying like, whoops, I didn't know it was in there. I think that's bullshit. But to your basic question is what's going to happen with that? That I am very confident will be removed by the parliamentarian. It is not eligible for a 50 vote threshold. That is definitely a 60 voter. So lots of things to be pissed off about. I think you can still be pissed about that the House of Representatives would actually vote for this on the Republican side unanimously. But I don't think you have to worry that this will become law. What does this mean for my student loans? It sort of depends on your individual circumstances. So this, I feel like, I'm sorry to give you a vague answer, but whenever it comes to like an individual, like what does this mean for my personal situation? I'm sort of wary of offering advice over the internet. So I think it depends on everybody's individual situation, but I think it's fair to say that the current regime is hostile to students, to universities, and to subsidized student loans. What should we be paying the most attention to on this? Look, I think, here's my advice. I think there's a lot of stuff that, pisses people off. Like some people are particularly outraged at a ban on regulating AI for the next 10 years. And obviously somebody just talked about withholding money for the enforcement of temporary restraining orders and other court orders. Like those are all things to be really pissed off about. But I think the best way to kill this bill is to focus on the Medicaid cuts, the nutrition assistance cuts, and where the money is going towards. So, whenever it's time, and obviously I'm not doing electoral stuff on this, I'm in the government building, but whenever it's time to campaign for my own sake, I figure out what my record is and make sure everything we're talking about is true, but then we select the things that are most compelling to the voters, which may or may not be the things that are most compelling to me, the things that I am personally the most proud about, or the things that I'm the most interested in. It is okay in politics to talk about the most compelling thing that moves the most votes. And I am telling you that of all the outrages, of all the things that you are pissed off about or worried about, that the thing that is most likely to kill this bill is this idea that they are raising prices on Americans on the healthcare side, on the grocery side, on the electricity side, in order to generate enough money to provide tax cuts for a bunch of people that most of us have never met. And so I think we need to have real discipline here as a party, sort of left, center left, leftist, everybody just talk about Medicaid cuts because it is unifying and it is by far the most compelling way to talk about this bill. In fact, there's so much crap in this bill that we could do ourselves a disservice where everyone picks their least favorite provision and then our message is muddled, right? And that's what they want. They are trying to flood the zone. So we have to say, they're cutting your healthcare, they're raising your prices, and they are taking all the money out of your pocket and giving it to someone else. Is there anything that we can do to stop what's happening with the American people was the question. Yeah, we can kill this bill. We really can kill this bill. I'm not saying we're gonna kill this bill, but I am saying that it feels right now like it felt before the Affordable Care Act fight and before we won. It was one of those things where we were losing until we won, right? We did not think we had the votes. Even going into that evening, I was expecting that political parties, generally speaking, deliver for their presidents and that's how this was gonna land. And that is not how this landed. And it wasn't, we tried we did everything. We fought like hell and I thought we were pretty effective in that way. But when I say we, I'm not really talking about like me and Booker and Murphy. I'm talking about everybody in the world. The reason that the senior senator from Arizona, John McCain, went onto the floor and famously gave the thumbs down is because he was hearing from his constituents. And so if we're going to generate 4 no votes, it has to be through those constituents. There is no magic like speech I'm going to give or Facebook Live I'm going to do or a cable hit or email or tweet that's sort of like some dagger to this bill. The only way this thing falls is if politicians make the judgment that they are quite afraid of what's going to happen to their constituents. Okay, Felicia on Facebook. How can we address the lack of protections on habeas corpus, and what is going to happen with the personal data that was stolen from companies like Palantir? Look, I think that's kind of a multi-tiered question. I could chew up more time than we have. This is one where the law is on our side and we don't need new legislation. And I kind of disagree with some of it's a friendly disagreement. It's not like I think they're terrible or they think I'm terrible. My view is when the law is being violated, that the solution is not a new law to say, hey, remember that old law? You got to enforce that law. These people are being unlawful, and what we need to do is enforce the law in court. It is definitely true that the administration has been sandbagging compliance, but for the most part, we have been winning in court. And for the most part, there has been slow, but meaningful compliance over time. And so I just don't want us to throw up our hands and say, well, it's all over and they're just going to defy court orders. The truth is they're not. They are in some instances. I think the El Salvador case is a particularly egregious example of Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem and Marco Rubio, all pretty close to the borderline of defying court orders. But for the most part, the Article 3 branch, the judiciary, has sort of stood up for democracy. Even the judges that I voted against, even the judges that were appointed by Trump, are finding all of his conduct to be just too damn much. Oh, well, Miranda from Instagram, in all honesty, is there actually any hope the big budget bill will not pass? Look, I think this is one of the problems with the movement that I'm trying to help to solve, which is, I agree. If I thought we were just going to lose, then I would be talking about this mostly in the context of raising our voices, or, politicians make choices and then they're accountable to the voters. We want to make this thing maximally unpopular so that they suffer, politically. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we still have a puncher's chance, probably not like a high likelihood, but not zero either, to kill this bill. So yes, there is actually a hope that this big, I forgot what they call it, this crappy budget bill will not pass. And my view is the strategy is the same. Try to kill the bill. And if the bill is going to pass anyway, that we've done a ton of organizing and public communication and public education about how terrible this bill is, and then it flows right into, sort of plan B in our strategy. But plan A is to kill this thing. And in order to execute plan A, we actually have to believe in ourselves and each other, right? We can't just walk around going, oh, the Democrats are so flat-footed, I can't believe it, and they're flooding the zone, and they're just going to win on everything. That's not the way you win a battle. You have to actually believe you can win the battle and believe in your team. Flawed as it is, screwed up as it is, the last election was a total failure for us, but that doesn't mean we always lose. That doesn't mean we can't win this one. And part of it has to do with how much we believe in our ability for a very, very unpopular bill to become well-known and unpopular enough where people say, I'm in a swing district. This seems like a dumb idea for me. And that's what we've got to do. Janet on Facebook. What can be done about the people being taken off the streets, out of their homes, who are legally here? They're just rounding up anyone not caring who they are or if they have a right to be here. I think this is, I think there's a court aspect of this where we are prevailing. And I just don't want to gloss over that. But I also think physical presence, peaceful physical observation and presence, and educating people as to what their rights are, it's really an important aspect of this. And so, the law enforcement officers are being called to do these law enforcement actions, ICE agents, the Homeland Security, investigations folks, the FBI, sometimes the Guard, sometimes local PDs. Like, they're not uniformly, rotten people or something. Like, they're just doing a job. And if they see community pushback, and again, I'm not talking about physically getting in the way of an operation, but if they see community observation, community pushback, if they see, even in Hawaii, we specifically are sort of like, look, we don't operate that way in the state of Hawaii. We're different here. We're kind to each other. You're free to enforce the law, and you're free, frankly, even to enforce the law more vigorously than you think the previous administration did. but there's a way to do this where you're not terrorizing people in schools and synagogues and churches and hospitals. And so my own judgment is that like one gap is the nonprofit community, other churches, individual citizens in an organized, thoughtful, legal, peaceful way to observe this stuff and provide some kind of pushback to these actions. Because I think to the extent that these folks think they are not being observed, it's more likely that some, bad behavior occurs. Who do I have winning the NBA Finals? Thank you so much for this question. It's OKC in 5. I don't think it's that close. I wish it were closer because I'm now at the point in the sports year where we're getting into baseball, which is not my favorite thing, and then we got to wait for football. So I always, unless it's my team, which is the Detroit Pistons, which means it's been a long time, I always root for a 7-game finals just so I can watch more basketball. I am really pleased to, and I know like senators always say, everyone is my dear friend. That's a whole thing we do. But this guy is my dear friend. He's one of my favorite people in the United States Senate. I served as the chairman of the Committee on Indian Affairs, which has jurisdiction over the government's relationship with tribes and Native Hawaiians and Alaska Natives. And this person, Ben Ray Lujan, the senator from New Mexico, taught me nearly everything I know about tribal communities, and is just a very sincere human being, a super smart human being, and a person who is all New Mexico all the time. So without further ado, Ben Ray Lujan.
Hey. All right. Oh, hey, everyone. Good to be with you. You can see why Brian is such an incredible